Hi, I'm Lizzie and I read books. Welcome back to yet another monthly wrap up. January marks 1 year of trying to share my thoughts about books in a more regular manner. I try and upload once a week, thereabout, update you about the books I'm reading or the art I'm making. So subscribe. So I'll start with the first book I read, which was a recommendation from my friend Erin, and it's called The Library Book by Susan Orlean, who, if I remember correctly, also wrote The Orchid Thief. Haven't read that. But this was really fun. It's an investigation into who would have been the arsonist for, or who was the arsonist responsible for the fire at the downtown central LA library. And the book talks about the importance of libraries. I think if you care about the art of librarianship, that this book would really speak to you. To me, I didn't feel like I needed to be convinced. Susan does a good job of interviewing people, and you get a sense of the people. Some of the very first characteristics, or characterizations, I should say, or just descriptions even, were a little much, if I recall. Overall, it had a clear story, and I was hooked to know more what happened to the library. And now I have this image stuck in my head of library books being pressurized, essentially, to remove any of the water damage that would have happened as a result of putting out the fire. So, check it out. It's a pretty quick read, not too difficult either. Then I read Heartstopper Volume 1. This is, a cult classic. People really enjoy it for a reason. I'm not trying to poo-poo it there. I'm just saying there's a reason I didn't pick up on the initial hype or even know about it maybe before hype, which sounds pretentious, but, there's a reason that it didn't quite permeate my world. Next, I read Want, which is a novel, unnamed woman moving through the world, and so a lot of it reminds me of the literary fiction that I read last year primarily. Woman living, she's a teacher, she also adjuncts as a professor, and kind of the life she's living and as it unravels, and she's also filing for bankruptcy and all the intricacies, and this friendship is changing, going through a different stage. Told in such a voice that you can stay, I'd say, in the world really well, or I could, just enough detail without feeling like, I don't know, magical realist or fantasy, which always takes me to a different place. I always care for that. So basically, what you're signing up for, if you read the tin, that's what it is. Picked it up kind of on a whim. Was not on my 400 plus, well, just barely 400 to read list. However, happy I read it. That's what I'll say. And then to amend that error of not quite reading off my to-read list, I read a graphic novel that indeed was on my list since probably 2018, 2019, so 4 years ago. And that's The Arab of the Future, A Childhood in the Middle East, one time period, 1978, 1984. And then I also read the sequel. It turns out the sequel was what I had on my to-read list. I think at some point I'd gone through and saw Goodreads' recommendations for graphic novels. And this one is set between France and Syria. The author is basically telling his story, his childhood, his loving parents and the sacrifices they made, but also I think I get the sense that he's just along for the ride. Parents are still fully living their lives, and wow, yeah, he has a younger brother. The brother barely is alive through most of the 2 books that I read. I think there's more, but I didn't see that they were all translated into English. So, you follow this kid going through the normal growing pains as well. Your first time going to school and feeling like you don't know anyone, you don't have any friends. as well as the language barrier he felt, but also the affinity he grew for Arabic as opposed to French. Loved his art style. I think he drew people with a lot of heart, if that makes sense. It probably doesn't. Yeah, really beautiful books, and I think I wrote about this in my newsletter, which I'll link below in case you're curious. But as I wrote about, to me, it just made me aware that I'm super ignorant about these countries and cultures. Even, like in France, like past the, say, like French Revolution, like what happened, who were the people in power, etc. And just what was important to the culture. And same in Syria. And it made me realize I can barely name cities in Syria, but now I know a couple more. So if you're looking to expand your understanding, or maybe you come from those cultures and you're looking for a way to see yourself represented, I recommend. Lastly, I read How We Get Free, which chronicles a couple interviews with Black feminist leaders, as well as the Combahee River Collective's statement, which they made in response to what was happening at the time in the late 70s. I loved it. Great to read those voices and honor their legacy of how much badassery and I'd say collective power as well that they were forming. While I may have read or listened to a lot of the thinkers and Black feminist theorists before, it was cool to have them in this context and to definitely learn more. I'm always seeking to understand that experience, as I have not lived it. That is what I read in January, 6 books. I'm proud of that. I think that's a good start for the year. I did set a goal to read 75 books, which is similar to last year. I did achieve last year, so pat myself on the back for that. And yeah, that's it. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.